to recap, we were speaking about how this world is really the place in which we meet God face to face, and we can embrace God completely, while in the world to come, they only have the pleasure of being spectators of the grand stage, as we put it, of God himself, without the ability really to interact with God fully and embrace him. How do we do so in this world? So we spoke about Teshuvah Ma'asim Tovim, quoting the ethics of our fathers, which means through repentance and good deeds, or in general through the study of the Torah too. Each time we do a mitzvah, we study Torah, or we repent, we are interacting, we are becoming one with God, an act that cannot be done in the world to come, the world of souls that don't have the opportunity to do the mitzvahs. The Torah was not given to them. Remember, we quoted that passage from the tractate of Shabbat in the Talmud.
Excuse me, Rabbi. Margot, I think, is waiting to get in. She just sent me a message.
Oh, I don't see her on the participants list.
She says she's there waiting, but okay.
Tell her, are you on the phone with her?
No, I'm messaging her.
Oh, I would tell her maybe just to go off and then go back in.
Okay, I'll tell her that.
Yeah, no problem. I'm really sorry. I really don't know what happened to my Zoom, but yeah, I think maybe it's best to go off and then go back on. All right, friends. So just in short, again, in this world, we are embracing God, becoming one with God, with the mitzvahs and Torah study. In the world to come, it's already too late. And that's when the souls really only have the pleasure of being spectators and not participants in this grand stage. That was the big idea. Let's continue here, as Rabbi Eisen mentioned, in the middle of page 138. Does anyone want to read? Which is why the reference is.
I can help
Please,
you out.
Diana, go for it.
Which is why the reference is to the glow of the divine presence. As for the essence of the Holy One, blessed be he, no thought can apprehend him at all. Thus, the spiritual inhabitants of the world to come can only relate to the glow of the divine presence, to a mere reflection of the divine reality, rather than to the essence of the divine light. They cannot apprehend the luminary, the source of the light, God himself, nor even the light, the direct and utter expression of the luminary's essence, only a reflection of the light. This is the most that a created entity of the highest order can grasp on its own of the divine reality.
Right. So I'm going to use an analogy that the author of the Tanya himself used, but and he uses it in the Tanya and in other places too. But that is that when we do a mitzvah in this world, we're hugging God. Now, when you're hugging a king, it doesn't matter whether he's wearing 7 layers of clothes or 1 layer of clothes. You're still hugging the king, no matter how many layers he has. Same here, when you do a mitzvah, it doesn't matter how many layers God has in order to conceal that light that we're speaking about here. He could be wearing 20 layers, but it doesn't matter. By doing a mitzvah, you're embracing that God, and it's the exact same embrace as if he was wearing 1 layer. So here in this world, even though God's light may be completely concealed, and that's, by the way, the word that's hinted in the world, in the Hebrew, the word world, olam, comes from the word concealed, le'alem, olam. That's because God's light is indeed concealed. Nonetheless, by doing a mitzvah, we're hugging God with many layers, but we're still hugging God. In the world to come, there may be less layers than there are in this world. You don't have materialism. You don't have the physical body. You don't have many other layers. And you have maybe a more revealed God. Nonetheless, that revealed God cannot embrace you. All you can do is enjoy the light that's coming from God, from that revelation of God. Now, even worse, and this is what this is saying, is that in the world to come, yes, God may be less concealed and therefore more revealed, but you can't hug him. All you can do is watch his light and enjoy the pleasure of his light, or the ziv, the ray of his light.
Why can't you hug him?
Because you can't do mitzvahs. You can't study Torah. You can't come one with him. God gave us the opportunity in this world He gave us the Torah. We just read about it yesterday, right? He gave us the Torah in this world in order for us to become one with him here in this world. In another world, it's too late already. Oh, yes, Margot. Okay, good. So even though it's interesting, because even though God's light is more revealed in the next world, he still maintains a very strong distance. While here, even though God's light is more concealed, he doesn't maintain that distance. He still allows you to come close to him and embrace him. And that's really the difference between this world and the next. And therefore, again, it emphasizes the point that here we shouldn't waste a second. Now, I remember living in Atlanta, and there the big coffee chain, I don't know if it still exists, might not. It's not Starbucks, but it's Caribou Coffee. You familiar with it, anyone? Caribou Coffee?
Yeah.
So Caribou, I was actually, I still remember because I was impressed by their slogan. The slogan is "Life is short, stay awake for it." And I would say the same thing. Life is short, stay awake for it. Awake for the mitzvahs, awake for those opportunities. Because afterwards, that's it. It's too late. No matter how much light you may be privy to, etc., it's just too late for those hugs of God.
There's one at the Denver airport.
Oh, there is?
Yeah.
It's good coffee.
Yeah.
Good coffee. Yeah.
There.
I know, I used to go all the time. But it's great. It's true. Stay awake for it. You know, the Hasidic masters, great rabbis, speak about how we will really regret after 120. We'll regret not doing enough mitzvahs, because then it will be too late, and then we'll look back and say, "Gosh, I could have been much more united with God. Could have really
You know,
the highest level."
I
Yeah.
think it's a shame if we feel when we reach that point in our life that we could have done more, that we need to embrace what we've done. I think it's important that we acknowledge what we've accomplished. We can always do more. There's always another. But until we get satisfied and accept and are grateful for what we have done, that God has given us the opportunity to do mitzvahs. Wow, that's a pretty good deal. You know, I know so little about Zohar, but one of the things in Zohar, they say, as it is concealed, so it is revealed.
Mm.
And when we allow ourselves to do those mitzvahs and let the light come in and touch the light and let the light touch us.
Very, very beautifully said. It's like Leonard Cohen's line: "Forget the perfect offering. There's a crack in everything."
Crack in everything. And that light and without the crack, the light doesn't come in.
That's correct. That's right. And sometimes we look at missed opportunities, but they were opportunities that really created those cracks for the light to come in. They were, like it says in Hasidic teachings, "Yerida letorech aliyah." It's a descent in order to ascend. Without that descent, I could have not ascended to the heights that I'm ascending now. That's absolutely right. To look at it with regret, it's true. But I'm saying in the world to come, when the soul now is free from the body and from any even intellectual thoughts, then you can say, "Oh, okay, I could have done more." In a way, I think it's and I'm happy you bring this up, Ronnie, because I think it's a fine balance. On the one hand, we should thank God for everything he has given us in life, the ups and the downs, the perfections and the imperfections. But on the other hand, also, we should have some dosage of bitterness, because that's what propels us to grow. If we're completely satisfied with our lives, then maybe that will stall our growth. So I think it's a little, it's a fine balance between those two feelings, those two emotions. We should never think that, okay, I've arrived. Like Rabbi Stein says, if you've arrived, if you think you've arrived, you're lost. You can always look back and say, I have more to do. And in a way, I think that's really what the author of the Tanya is trying to do here to us, to the reader, saying, okay, look, you have opportunities here to do mitzvahs, to study Torah, to do teshuvah, to become one with God. And in the world to come, it will already be too late. So what are you waiting for? Yeah.
And do we become one with God, or are we always one with God? And it's when the light comes in that we have the appreciation of it. I think we're always one with God. There's no choice. There's no separation. Never a separation.
Yeah, but it's the question of, let's take a bad analogy, but are we always one with our parents? There are moments of friction, you know, especially during the teen years, you have moments of friction. So yes, you were one with God, you with your parents. Sorry, you one with them, and the DNA doesn't lie. But there were moments of separation. Yeah, we're speaking about the oneness that we have with God. That is a oneness of um, of of wholesomeness, where there is
The oneness of God I'm referring to is infinite. The separation that we can have with God is momentary, and we always come back to the realization that we are one with God,
right.
and there is no separation.
Right. No, good point. Deep inside, I mean, we have a soul. And that soul is a part of God, and therefore we are one with God. The question is if we'll be one with God also in every other level, in our consciousness, in our actions, in our heart, etc.
And
Yeah.
that's the balance.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Rabbi, I think what I'm seeing is that we have an intention, and when you're doing the intention, you feel good and you feel like you've accomplished something. It's very satisfying, so that you're satisfied now as well as in the world to come, because everything you do that you're doing with intention, you actually feel good about yourself and what you're doing.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's true. It's true. But I would add, and we've spoken about this, right? Even if there's no intention, then the action is an action. The good action is a good action.
Mm-hmm.
Now, ideally, absolutely, you should have the intention. But if I don't feel like giving tzedakah and I give it anyway, my mitzvah counts.
Mm-hmm.
The action happened and it eventually helped someone. So the intention is important, especially in refining the human being. But at the end of the day, it's the action that counts most. Amaaseh wa ikar, in the words, Aikar wa amaaseh, in the words of the ethics of our fathers. Yeah, that the most important thing is the deed. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Yeah. Just want to add one more thing, just in his loving memory, in his honor. But exactly a week ago, really one of the great giants of our generation, another giant was taken away from us, Rabbi Dr. Abraham J. Tversky. And he was a person who came from a very Hasidic family. In fact, he always wore that traditional Hasidic garb, the shtreimel, the long black coat, you know, big white beard, that was untouched his whole life. Yet he became a doctor, became one of the great experts in addiction. And he had a rehab center in Pittsburgh that was visited by world-renowned figures and simpletons alike. He wrote many books on addiction and Judaism also. He has a great book on prayer, by the way, on tefillah, and other books too. But I just saw a video, just 3 days, of him speaking about these good deeds that one should do. And he was a big, also in his books, you see that he was a big believer in what is taught, and that is that be the change that you want to see in the world, as Gandhi put it, right? That it starts from within. And he quoted a story by Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was the student of the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, who really was the one who wrote down all of his teachings that we have, of all of Rabbi Luria's teachings that we have today. So Rabbi Chaim Vital said that there was this man. There was a man who did kindness everywhere. And he helped a ton of people. And when he came to the world to come, the gates of paradise were closed for him. And he said, I don't understand. I did kindness everywhere. And the angels told him, no. You did kindness everywhere, but you weren't kind to your family, to your own. So the gates are closed. Now, that's the story told. I mean, I'm sure the video is running around via WhatsApp and social media, etc. but I'm thinking about this video because, you know, it starts within. Those embraces of God, those hugs of God, ought to start within our own families, within our own network. It's easy to do a mitzvah for that stranger. It's really easy. It's much easier to love someone that I've never met before. But how about loving the people you know with all of their defaults, with all of their imperfections? That's much harder, but that's where it starts. And I think that that oneness with God really is solidified, or it really becomes permanent when we create that light from within. So it's important just to note that, because we speak about mitzvahs, and you know, the big thing today is tikkun olam. But how about your own family? How about your own network?
And to put it a little bit further, it starts with loving yourself. And
Right.
without loving yourself, and then loving God, and then moving it to your family.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Yeah. You know, the mitzvah, the famous verse, to love your fellow as yourself. In other words, if you don't love yourself, you can't love your fellow. Right. Good. Okay. We can continue. Otherwise, really, I'd love to hear more comments, etc. Okay, fine. Okay. All right, let's continue. Bottom of page 138. Margot, welcome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I got on with my
Be
phone. I
patient.
don't know
I
what
know.
happened.
So there was a Zoom issue here this morning, and
Yeah,
you're in the room, so that's what
yeah.
counts. Good, good. Okay. So does anyone want to continue to read? Bottom of page 138. Except when it is apprehended and clothed in the Torah and its mitzvot. Anyone?
Oh, you started down there.
No, we started one before.
We're really at the which is why the reference.
Right.
We
So
did it.
We just read that.
But we talked about, oh, you read that? Okay.
Right, yeah, and we explained how really in the world
I'm
to
sorry.
come, you can't embrace God, even
Okay,
though
I'm
God may
sorry.
be more revealed there, and his glow appears in a more unreserved way.
Okay,
So Margaret, why don't you continue? Except
sure.
when it,
Okay. Except when it is apprehended and clothed in the Torah and its mitzvot. Then the human being does literally apprehend and is clothed in the Holy One, blessed be he, since the Torah and the Holy One, blessed be he, are one. There is, however, one way in which a creature can apprehend and thus unite with the divine essence, surmounting the quantum boundary that no level of apprehension can cross, through its assimilation of the concepts of the Torah and its involvement in the doing of mitzvot. When a person does a mitzvah, he becomes a part of the mitzvah. When he studies Torah, he unites with the commander of the mitzvah, with the giver of the Torah. The Torah is not merely God's instructions to man, but a manifestation of the divine essence. It is not a reflection of divine light, not even a reflection of divinity, but divinity itself. Apprehending Torah, attachment and union with it, is an apprehension of and the union with God himself.
right, because right. So the analogy for that, I know in Kabbalistic sources, is of a king that was glorified and well known and world renowned, and the simpleton really of the street does not have any connection with the king. But say the king goes to that simple man and says to him, "Hey, can you please bring me a cup of water?" All of a sudden, there's a connection between the king and the simple man, and that connection is a connection that is as deep as it gets. He's dependent now on the simple man to get him water. God, the king, sorry, is dependent on the simple man to get him water, and the simple man now feels, okay, I thought I was just a fan. I thought I was just, you know, living in his kingdom, but I'm really one with this king. Same with God. When it comes to the Torah and the mitzvot, the minute God tells us, do so and so, then it's God telling us, bring us water. And then God almost becomes dependent on us. And we are given this unique opportunity to connect to him. Now, we may have had a connection with God like we spoke about before. We were part of his kingdom. We will always be part of his kingdom. We may have been even created by him. But that commandment itself is really what creates this bridge, this connection between us and God. And this is what this is saying. the mitzvah itself here is what connects us with the giver of the mitzvah, with the giver of the Torah. And that they don't have in our world. And therefore, again, every mitzvah is an opportunity to create yet another connection, another connection, another connection with God. Now, I will say this. I think we just read about it yesterday, but it's this beautiful idea about how the first word of, I don't know if we've spoken about this in the past, and if yes, then excuse the repetition. But the first word of the Ten Commandments is an interesting word because really it's an Egyptian word, Anochi. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God, your Lord. The Hebrew word should be Ani, right? But Anochi is an Egyptian word, which really immediately, rings many questions for many of the commentaries. And there are many answers to why God decided to use this word. I'll just share two. One is a Hasidic answer, one is a Kabbalistic answer. One is God was really in that first word when he revealed himself for the first time fully to the Jewish people, because he himself, according to the Midrash, uttered the first utterance, the first commandment, the first and the second commandment, and then the Jewish people couldn't take God's voice anymore. It was all too powerful for them, so they asked Moses to listen to God and then mention the rest. But when God uttered that first word to the Jewish people, he was also conveying in that first word his intention of and his reasoning of why he was giving the Torah. God was giving the Torah not for the heavens, but he was giving the Torah for the Egypts of the world. That's why he used an Egyptian word. And the purpose of the Torah is not for us to keep it for ourselves, but it's for us to bring it to the lowliest parts of this world and illuminate those parts with it. And therefore, we find these commandments, this desire for connection, give me a cup of water, in this world, because that was God's desire, to connect the Egypts with him, not the heavens with him. They're already more or less connected. But now God wants to connect the Egypts with him, and he's dependent on us to do that. Each time we bring a word of Torah to wherever we may be, to the Egypts or not, but to this world, we're actually fulfilling the purpose for which the Torah was given, and in a way creating a connection that could not be created in any other world with any other creature and in any other sphere. That's really the one big idea. Another idea is that in the word Anochi, this is the Kabbalistic interpretation, we have really 4 Aramaic words, which Anochi is really the initials for them. Aleph Nun Chaf Yud stands for Ana Nafshi Ketavit Yahavit, which means that I, my soul, have written and given. Now, it's God saying, this Torah is my soul. I wrote it down in written words, and I'm giving it to you. And therefore, you should know that each time you study Torah, you are connecting with my soul. Those words are my soul. Ana nafshi ketavit yahavit. I have written down my soul, and I've given it to you. Now, again, in both concepts, both the Hasidic and the Kabbalistic, we find this idea that the opportunity for connection is specifically through the Torah and the fulfillment of the Torah, and more particularly through the fulfillment of the Torah in the Egypt-like places and moments of our lives. That's truly what is most important. You know, speaking about Rabbi Twersky, another story comes to mind, but it's amazing to me. Right, so as mentioned, Rabbi Twersky had a rehab center in Pittsburgh, and not too long ago, he had a priest who had problems with alcoholism come to him. And Baruch Hashem, he was successful in his rehab treatment. But at the end of the rehab treatment, he approached Rabbi Twersky and he said, look, I don't know what to do. I run masses and I have to drink wine. So what am I going to do? I can't, you just said, I can't touch alcohol ever again. Rabbi Twersky said, it's easy. Just drink grape juice instead.
Yeah.
A week later, the supervisor of this priest calls Rabbi Twersky and says, hey, who do you think you are that you can change rules of the church that have existed for hundreds of years? And Rabbi Twersky said, well, I learned it from my own roots. I learned it from some great authorities in Jewish history. It began, and the whole story is this, I don't want to bore you too much, but began with the Turei Zahav. He was a great commentator on the code of Jewish law who lived in the early 1600s. His full name was Rabbi David Alevi Siegel, and he lived during the times in which the blood libel accusations were very strong. And then therefore he wrote in his commentary that although Jews, yes, are supposed to drink 4 cups of red wine during Passover Seders, they ought to drink 4 cups of white wine, so that the non-Jews couldn't accuse us so quickly, saying, oh, you're drinking blood. Color is changed, then they'll have less of grounds to accuse us of this crazy, completely false accusation, as we all know. Now, 100 years later, Rabbi Shneur Zalman Avliadi, the author of this book right here, the Tanya, reaffirmed his position, the Turei Zahav, and he said you can drink white wine. Fast forward about 100 years, and the Brisker Rav, another great rabbi, his full name was Rabbi Yitzchak Zev Soloveitchik, and the Brisker Rav writes that people who have problems with alcohol can drink grape juice. Just like they changed it from red wine to white wine, we can change it from wine to grape juice. So I'm relying on my own Jewish authorities. Fine. About a month later, Rabbi Twersky receives a call from the Vatican. And in the Vatican, he tells the story. In the Vatican, they tell Rabbi Twersky, you should know that your ruling went all the way up to the Pope. And the Pope had to issue a new edict to tell priests everywhere in the world that if they suffer from alcoholism, they can drink grape juice. Here is a Hasidic rabbi sitting in Pittsburgh telling a priest, based on Jewish law, that he can drink grape juice instead of wine. Great. And it makes an effect on the entire world, on not the Egypt, but on the Anochis of the world. So again, Rabbi Twersky was a man who brought the light of the Torah who did exactly what we are speaking about here, to the Egypts of the world, fulfilled that connection that really, if you think about it, can be fulfilled anywhere else. So we should celebrate the fact that we live in America and that we are exposed all the time to Egypts, good ones and bad ones, because really it's the opportunity for us to fulfill the reason for which the Torah was given, Anochi, to connect those Egypts to God. And that is something, again, that can't be done, not in anywhere else, not in the upper world, of course, and maybe not even by other creatures.
Good one.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear more of your comments. Otherwise, we can continue a little bit more. Even I want to dwell a little bit on the word mitzvah. It's important to understand the word mitzvah. Mitzvah is usually translated as a word that means good deed. That's a complete mistranslation. Mitzvah does not mean good deed. It means 2 things. It comes from the word letzavot, tzav, which means to command, and it's God commanding us, again, creating that connection between the king and the simpleton, asking him to bring him a cup of water. But there is another word that mitzvah alludes to, and that's the word tzevet. And tzevet in Hebrew means, therefore he uses here the word unity. Tzevet means a team, part of the same team. So by God giving us a mitzvah, he's telling us, be on my team. Let's connect. Or the Aramaic word is tzavta, which means really connection. And that's what the word mitzvah really means. So in the word mitzvah, we have this huge idea of uniting with God and uniting the Egypts of the world with God. Right, any questions, comments? You're quiet today. No?
Not in a few minutes.
Okay.
Rabbi, question about the parsha. You were referring to it that the nation was too taken by the experience to accept all of the 10 commandments being stated by God.
Yeah.
But when you read the parsha, it does say that God spoke all these matters, and then it goes on and it states all of them. And then it's not till the next section where it mentions that the people were impacted by the thunder and the flames and
right.
the blast of the shofar and the smoke and everything else.
Right. So this midrash is based really on a word that maybe doesn't belong there. Why? Because the introduction indeed is God spoke these things, Ela Dvarim, Bnei Israel, to the Jewish people, lemor, saying. And the Midrash says, well, that word lemor, saying, is superfluous. It should say that God spoke these things, and then continue with the 10 Commandments. What does it mean, saying? Why that extra word, saying? So the Midrash then jumps, and there's other explanations to that too. But the Midrash that we're speaking about says that, okay, God spoke these words, but then the Jewish people couldn't take it. So then Moses had to step in and do the same.
Mhm.
So there were two voices, the voice of God at the onset, and then the saying is the voice of Moses that gave us the rest. Now, just to point out, it's interesting because you did mention that the clouds and the thunders that made the people move. The Kotzker Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Morgenstern, who was a demander of truth, almost like Rabbi Steinsaltz a little bit. But there's that verse that says, Vayara Am Vayanu Vayamdu Merachok. It's connected yet to what we're saying about the Tanya, learning about in the Tanya. But it says that the nation saw, they were moved, Vayanu, and they stood from afar. Like, wow, what's happening? But the Kotzker Rebbe interprets this as really as a lament of God, because he says, look, the nation saw and they were moved, and yet with all those emotions, they still didn't come closer. They still didn't take a step further. They still stood afar. The whole purpose of the giving of the Torah was not to move us, but rather to move us in order for us to take a step further. And yet the Jewish people are, oh, wow, it's so nice, etc., but it doesn't really make any real change. They still stood from afar. And he was lamenting that fact based on this verse. And in a way, I think it's very much connected to what the Tanya says here. Yeah, God gave us the Torah, not for us to say, oh, this is a beautiful thing. It's a nice little book. And look, it has some history in it. And then just put it, close it, and then go on with our days. No, God wants us to be moved so deeply that it propels us to action, propels us to connection.